Check out my latest Facebook Marketplace buy. This is a 1929 Ford Model A chassis with supposedly a good running engine on it, a good radiator, and a good fuel tank. Supposedly. Guys, welcome back to Rodder's Garage. I just recently had this thing delivered to me. A good friend of mine, Josh, went and picked this thing up. It was about a 2.5 hour trip each direction for him to go get it. So Josh, if you're watching, thank you very much. If you guys have been following along with Rodder's Garage, in this very garage, I fired up an all-original Model A, 1928 Model A coupe that was being used as yard art in a flower garden, and have slowly, and I mean slowly, been getting that car back together. I left off about 6 months ago at this point in time now on the yard art Model A, putting all steel floor pans in the car, and at that point I pretty much doubled down on the shop projects for customers, and at this point in time was gearing up to start working on the yard art Model A again. However, I found out that there's some races coming up. In 30 days, exactly 30 days from now, there is a race coming up at a show we've gone to for the last few years, and that is exactly what I wanted to do with the yard art Model A. However, I know for a fact that the yard art Model A is not going to get completed in 1 month. The yard art Model A I want painted really nice. I want the engine done in a specific way in that, which I've gone over in the past. And currently also my machine shop is moving into a new building, and we haven't even started on anything on the yard art Model A's engine block. So when I saw this thing come up on Facebook Marketplace and they said it runs and drives, well, I've got enough Model A junk laying around to throw together a really junky jalopy style, basically banger race car out of this thing. So the question is, does this thing actually run? And if it does run, well, I've got exactly 30 days to turn this into a running, driving race car to go race these 300-foot dirt drags. So, will it run? Supposedly ran 6 months ago. It does look like it has brand new oil in it when you pull the dipstick. So let's look this thing over, throw a battery to it, and see if this thing actually fires up like it was advertised as. And if it does, well, I'm going to start getting some parts together, and we're going to build a roadster style body on here and go race it. I'm gonna go ahead, jump in the engine bay, and pretty much take care of all these wires that are in here, because I pretty much don't need any of them except the one going to the coil to apply voltage to the coil to hopefully give this thing some spark once I hook the battery up. I should probably invest in a points file, but we'll just sand these up with some 100 grit for now. See if I can actually get some spark out of it. Oh yeah, much better. if I apply some power to this ignition coil here, assuming it cranks over, technically I should have spark. So let's see if it actually cranks. Make sure it's in neutral first. Seems to be. Yep, all right, I'm gonna tap the starter and we'll see if this thing actually cranks over. Nope. Let's try this again. Ooh. Oh, a few sparks, but the starter went. Try one more time. Oh, excellent. Let's see if we can get some spark out of this thing. All right, so I'm gonna give this wire a little power up. Should have stripped it a little bit more though. So I can wrap it around these vice grips here. And let's see if I can get any spark out of it. Oh yeah, actually it's pretty good. Let me plug it in once and I don't know, I guess we'll squirt something in the carburetor and see if it pops. All right, before I get too carried away, seeing if the thing actually pops over, let me pop this line off if I can find a 1/2-inch wrench here. Actually, that doesn't smell the worst. That's some fairly decent fuel. Well, it looks like the valve actually works yet too. On is vertical. On is vertical with the valve. All right, well, I'll turn it back on once I get the line in here, and let's see if this thing pops over. All right, there. I'll turn the fuel on. Well, let me hook up the ignition wire and crank it. Maybe the thing will fire right up just like the guy said. I don't know. We'll find out. That sounded promising. Yikes. I guess one last thing here tonight, before I call it quits for this evening, is I want to see if I can get spark out of the actual distributor cap down to the plug, because I feel like it's either weak or intermittent. Nothing. All right, I've got nothing coming out of the distributor. That could be a problem. Turn this light off. There. I don't think it's got spark out of the cap, which is probably the rotor. Try it again. Nothing. All right, so I've got spark at the coil wire, which I'm gonna check one more time. Yeah, plenty of spark at the wire. Nothing out of the cap. Well, that would be why it won't fire up. Probably got a couple of sparks there earlier when it backfired and tried to run, but absolutely nothing coming out of here. So here's the plan. Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna run down to the shop and grab the distributor cap, rotor, and coil that I used to start the Yard Art Model A, put all that stuff on here, and then I'm thinking we're gonna be good to go. Once it gets into the distributor cap, it is not transferring from the top of the distributor pin here through that rotor and getting out to the actual spark plugs till tomorrow morning. I've got parts. right, so I think I'm pretty much ready to start putting all the stuff back on top of the distributor and try to fire this thing up. Let me throw a cap and a rotor on here, and let's try this thing again. Just turned the gas on. Got everything set up here. The switch is off for the ignition. Ignition on. Here we go. At this point in time, I need to address a couple of issues to run this thing a little bit longer. Number one, the water pump isn't spinning. Although I can spin it fairly easy, the belt is wore down and the tensioner is maxed out over on the generator. So I need to find a shorter belt for this thing, as well as the lower radiator hose on the other side has sprung a major leak right in the side of the hose. If we get in here really close, you guys might be able to see that the side of this hose is split right open. And it's dripping some antifreeze on the floor. So I need to find a lower radiator hose, probably also replace the upper right away. And, well, then maybe I can put some coolant in the radiator or just some plain water and run this thing for a little bit longer of a time. I don't think the oil was changed on this in a while. Here comes the sludge. Oh, that is not good. That works. So I rounded up some parts. I got myself a much better fan belt on here. Although it's not the right fan belt, I'll have to get one in the future. This one should be a lot better than what was on it. I greased up the water pump, I oiled the bearings in the generator and tightened the generator down. All of this stuff should spin next time I fire the engine up. Also cut myself some radiator hoses for the upper and the lower. However, I did not install the lower coolant pipe yet because when I pulled this thing off, it was about 3/4 of the way full down in this elbow with what looked like pure mud. I went outside and washed that out already, but before I seal up the coolant system and fill it, I'm going to push the whole chassis outside and flush the radiator and block with the garden hose before sealing that back up and filling the system. So I do have to do that yet here in the future. I also got a better steering wheel on here, and as you guys saw, I had to switch the hub from the steering wheel that was on here. This wheel was set up for a tapered shaft with a half moon lock key, and this column has a spline shaft on it. So I basically robbed the hub off the broken wheel, drilled all the rivets, and installed it on this better wheel. That should work out perfect. One concerning thing was when I pulled the drain plug for the oil. I bought some fresh oil today. I was going to change it right away, and when I pulled that oil plug out, nothing came out except a few drops of water. And that's not good, but that sludge is a potential problem. And I know a lot of Model A guys told me that back when I started the Yard Art Model A, that you really should pull the pans and the side covers or the valve chest covers on these and get everything cleaned out, or at least make sure it's visibly clean before running them, because these engines use gravity to feed oil down to the main bearings and to the cam bearings, and in the crankcase or oil pan itself, there is a tray where the connecting rods come down and dip through to actually oil the bearings and the rods or the babbits. And if any of those areas get plugged up with sludge, like what's in this pan, you could potentially wipe out a bearing. So after seeing that sludge plugging up the drain hole in here, which by the way is a 3/4 inch hole when you pull that plug out, basically if that oil wasn't running out of that 3/4 inch hole because there's that much sludge in there, I think it would be a really good idea for me to pull everything off here and get everything cleaned out so I don't wreck a bearing in this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and pull off the manifolds, get the side cover off, get the pan off. Let's take a peek inside, get everything cleaned up, put it back together, put some fresh oil in it. And at that point, I'll flush that cooling system like I said, and maybe we'll get a seat welded on here and see if this thing actually drives around the yard, which I'm guessing it will. Hopefully the clutch is good in it. I also probably at some point will drain the gear oil in the trans and rear end and make sure there's no water in that stuff either, and fill those up with fresh fluid too. So let's get some parts pulled off this engine and take a peek inside. So I got the oil pan off, I've got the side cover off and the intake and all that good stuff, and I really doubt they were running this thing every year like they said, or within the last 6 months, that's for sure, especially with the way the distributor was all messed up and stuff like that. And I really hope they actually weren't running it, because there's some major stuff wrong inside that I noticed. And one other thing is, I guess as for the oil pan, it was absolutely disgusting inside. This is the junk that poured out of this oil pan. So I'm really glad I took it off to do this, and I almost kind of feel bad that I started it for that two 15-20 second runs that I did the other day, because that probably really didn't help anything out. But let's go down here and take a peek up in the crankcase. All right, so number one thing is, if you take a look at the oil pump here, it is completely packed full on the screen with that garbage that came out of that oil pan over there. I doubt anything was really making it up to the top where it's supposed to be going. There was a little bit of what seemed to be fresh oil up here, but that was probably just a minimal amount that was making its way through the screen. So I'm probably going to take the whole oil pump apart and clean it out and go through that. I mean, that's pretty bad the way it is now. As for the crankcase itself, it looks pretty nice up in here. It's not super dirty or rusty or anything weird like that, but I did give the rods a quick shakedown, and cylinder number 1 has got quite a bit of clearance in the rod bearing. Cylinder 2 is nice and tight, by feel anyway. Cylinder 3, I got a little bit on 3 as well for clearance in the rod. And as for the number 4 rod, that one's pretty tight. I didn't check any of the mains. Obviously, I didn't do anything but just shake down the rods And really what I should do is probably get some Plastigauge to actually check the rods and mains in this thing before I actually put the oil pan back on. That probably would be the best idea for me. Otherwise, it does look fairly clean down in the crankcase itself. As for the valve chest over here, this really surprised me. But the exhaust valve on 2 and cylinder number 1 are stuck wide open. Both hanging up. So basically it had 2 dead holes when it fired up the other day, and I'm gonna have to do something with that. Obviously the right thing to do would be pull the head off and get the valves out and clean everything up and put it back together, but I'll probably work with them a little bit and see if I can free them up so I don't have to pull all that stuff apart right now. But I do have to address that. The shaft for the distributor here and the spring and the oil pump drive and all that is really disgusting. So I'm going to pull the oil pump out. I'll probably pull the distributor back out and get all that stuff out of there and clean it up really good. And if we look at the floor inside the valve chest here, there is quite a bit of junk laying in there. All the tubes look like they're open. If we look, let me see if I can get light on it right there. If we look right in the back corner, tucked behind the lifter area there, that feeds the rear main. That seems to be wide open. I'll probably clean them out a little bit. The one for the cam on the back side looks wide open, but there is one piece of goo kind of starting to work its way down that hole. I'm just going to clean this thing all out. The center main looks to be open, and the front one as well back there. So they seem to be open. There's not too much junk up here, but I do want to clean this out really well and take care of all this other stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead, before it gets dark out, take the oil pan outside and power wash the inside of that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning all these parts up, pull that oil pump, and probably pull those 2 caps on those rods at a bare minimum and inspect the babbits, and maybe I can set the clearances on them and tighten them up a little bit. Yep. That's not cool. I'm gonna hold this cap tight right now. It is tight to the rod. If I move this up and down, look at the play in it. That's quite a bit. If you take a look at the babbit on that, it's actually not that bad. I mean, usually there's shims where you can take a layer or 2 off and tighten up the clearance on these rod caps. But if I actually put this back on real quick, like I said, I can get up and down movement more than it should be. I can feel that. But side to side, there's none. I can't budge it side to side. So really, what I probably will do with number 1 and number 4 rod is I'll grind the caps down a little bit to tighten up the tolerance. I'm gonna get some Plastigauge so I can check tolerance as I go along. If you get a nice flat surface like a piece of glass, I can lay some sandpaper down and take this rod and basically push it on the glass and hand sand it and take a few thou off this surface where it matches up to the actual rod itself and tighten that clearance up. So that's probably what I'm going to do on cylinder 1 and 4 as long as I have the oil pan off and I notice that they're visibly loose, because I can't imagine that these rods wouldn't rattle once this thing is up and running. The bearings themselves, the babbits look great. Cylinder 4, or rod number 4 looks I'm not gonna pull that off again. Rod number 4 looks exactly the same as this. They look in great condition, and there is a little play in, what one was it? I think I was wrong. Oh, cylinder 3. Cylinder 3 has a little bit of play too, not as much as 1 and 4. I'll probably pull all the rod caps, verify, just check the babbits in them. If I have to grind on the caps just a little bit to tighten up the tolerances, well, so be it, because I can't remove shims. And I'm gonna cross my fingers on the mains and put this thing back together after I get the oil pan cleaned, because I'm going to take it to the machine shop. Let's get out from under the car. Like I said, I'm going to take the oil pan to the machine shop and have them wash it in their washer, because even after power washing this, which by the way, a ton of scum came out of the bottom of this pan, like a ridiculous amount, like a couple of pounds, like a coffee can full of sludge came out of the bottom of this pan. But there is still a bunch of gross residue down there, so I'm gonna have that washed at the machine shop. I'm also gonna do the return pipe for the oil and the side cover, just have all that cleaned up right away. The oil pump and the oil pump drive. Something must have happened here. Probably something stuck in the pump the way that pan was full of junk, even though it spins freely right now, like really nice and free actually. The oil pump drive, however, is sheared off in the oil pump. That is the tab from it, and I thought for a little bit that maybe that happened when I tried to start it up, but I really doubt it, because if you look really close, it's actually got rust on the brake. Let's see if we can get this in focus. It's got rust on it. So I really don't think that just happened yesterday when I first fired this thing up, because if it corroded like that already, I'm guessing that happened a long time ago. And like I said too, I mean, this thing was supposed to be a good running engine, but I'm kind of hoping that was kind of smoke. I'm kind of hoping that was BS, because if that oil pump drive was sheared, I hope they weren't running it and driving it like that. And I really doubt they were anyway, because with the distributor and the condition it was and everything that they had going on here, I really doubt that they had this thing running any time in the recent few years. So I do actually have another supposedly good running Model A engine at the shop. If I get this thing up and running and it's knocking or something, I could probably change this engine out to that other one in like an hour and a half. That is an option in the future if this doesn't pan out. So that's pretty much going to be it for this video. I have to order some parts now, some gaskets, stuff like that. I'm probably going to jump on to getting the body done on this thing, because like I said, that race is 30 days away, 29 days now away, when they're gonna have these 300-foot dirt drags, and I would like to have this done by then. So, worst case scenario, I change the engine, but I'm gonna cross my fingers and hope this one pans out. Next video then is going to be, I'm gonna start on the body. I'm gonna get this cowl off. I have a different cowl, I have some other parts. I'm gonna start throwing together a body for this thing, and I'm gonna wrap this video up by pulling the cylinder head off of here, because I might as well pull the head off this engine right away and get the valves unstuck. I probably will pull all the valves out, clean everything up really good, as long as I have the engine tore down this far. Get all that stuff cleaned up, maybe clean the ports out, give them a quick polish, because there's a lot of junk inside the exhaust ports specifically on here. But I'll finish this video up by pulling the head and maybe knocking the valves loose, seeing if they come loose. And then I'll be back in a couple of days with some body fabrication on this thing. And when some engine parts come in, we'll get the motor back together, and hopefully everything pans out with that and it runs really good. Hopefully. So, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching. Till next time.